I'm Ric Edelman, and this is The Truth About Money. On today's show,
I make grown men cry 40 years after the fact.
I figure if I die, it won't matter to me.
Is it better to rent or to buy a house?
These are not bankers. These are investment salespeople.
all that is coming up right here, right now on The Truth About Money. Do you have a will? You certainly know what one is, but that doesn't mean you've got one. We asked people out on the street if they have a will, and here's what they told us.
No, I don't.
I do not.
I figure if I die, it won't matter to me.
I don't have a will, no.
I feel I'm still young. Do I need a will?
I don't think I'm going to die anytime soon, I guess. I don't know.
Here's a quick word to all of those who answered no. The fact is, everybody has a will. You too included. If you die without writing a will, you'll use the will that has been written for you by the state where you live. Yes, the state will decide who inherits your assets. It's called dying intestate, and you probably won't like the results. Maybe everything will go to your spouse or children, and maybe it won't. It depends on the state, and often a judge. No wonder that when people die without their own will, family fights are the result, maybe even causing a judge to decide who gets to inherit your house and its contents. It gets even worse if you have minor children. Most parents tell me that the reason they don't have a will is because they can't agree on who should raise the children if something happens to them. Well, guess what? Your will lets you name a guardian for the kids, but if you refuse to make that decision, if you fail to sign a will, some judge will pick a guardian for you. You might not like the choice, and there will be absolutely nothing you can do about it, because you'll be dead. And that isn't the way you want your kids to remember you. Do you really want them to remember that you let some judge dump them on a relative because you never made the choice yourself? No kids? Not married? Doesn't let you off the hook. Even single people need a will. Ditto if you're not married, but you have a life partner. In some cases, it's even more important. Why? Because married couples enjoy certain legal protections that non-married partners don't get. A will and some other estate planning documents can give you these important protections. So, good. Now that you're convinced you need to get a will, how do you do it? It's really quite simple. Just answer one simple question. Who gets what? That's really all there is to it. Take that information to a lawyer who specializes in wills and trusts, and the lawyer will take your wishes and put it on paper, all legal-like. You don't have to become an expert in estate planning. Your attorney will ask the right questions and get you to think about the important details. All you need to be an expert in is who gets what. And don't worry that you're not sure, because you can change your will anytime you want, quickly and easily, no big deal. Remember, answering one simple question, who gets what, helps make sure your family never has to ask, they got what? Here's some recent Q&A with a studio audience. Don't think I'm too smart with the answers, though. The tough questions, they got edited out in the studio booth.
Hey, Rick, I had a question. In the current economic situation, is it better to rent or to buy a house?
Here's the good news. Whether or not you should buy a house has nothing to do with the current economic situation. Because if you're going to buy a house, you're going to live in it for how many years?
5 to 10.
5 to 10 years, which means that the current economic situation is going to become the past economic situation really darn quick. You need to go in with the attitude that you're going to buy a house only if you stay in it at least 7 years. At least. The costs of home ownership are dramatically higher than that of renting, because in addition to the mortgage payment itself, you've got decorating. I mean, people who buy houses decorate and spend money that renters never do, right? We all do that, don't we? You're going to be buying lawnmowers. You're going to be doing all kinds of stuff with property maintenance and repairs, property taxes, insurance, none of which renters have to fuss about. So as a owner, you're going to deal with a lot of expenses that you don't have as a tenant. And because you're eventually going to sell the house, you're going to lose 6% of its future value in real estate commissions. So the house has to grow in value significantly to make the home buying really worthwhile. And what unfortunately occurs when people are buying a house at a young age, they tend to buy a house based on their current lifestyle. So let me ask you, are you married? No. Not yet married. Do you think you may be at some point?
Maybe 5 to 10 years out.
Maybe. Think you might have children?
Eventually.
Eventually. In other words, if we're going to buy a house and live in it for 7 to 10 years, we need to make sure that if we're going to be married with children during that period of time, the house I buy today has to accommodate all those people. Because otherwise you buy a house that's great for you as a bachelor, only to discover that by the time your lifestyle grows with the number of people living in the house, you need to move, and you need to move sooner, which means in 2 or 3 or 4 years, you've outgrown the property, and all of a sudden you find yourself significantly in the hole, and that's even assuming that real estate prices grow during this period of time. So the message is really slow down. You'll discover that it's easy to buy, hard to sell, and renting gives you flexibility that you otherwise might not enjoy. So be very, very careful before you jump into the notion of buying a house.
Thank you.
Hello, Rick. I'm a young father of 3 young children, and currently I am concerned about their education coming up in the future. And one of the things that I've considered as far as a 529 or an IRA and what educational costs will be in the future, for one, and number 2 is if they actually entertain going to college, how I can manage that to make sure if they do not, I can still manage my money appropriately for my children.
College is a very daunting issue today, unlike it was when we went to school. As a percentage of annual incomes, college costs have risen dramatically. It's the fastest growing segment of inflation. College costs are rising faster than any other aspect of the economy, and we all know the stress that we're dealing with. It's projected that a newborn today is going to spend over $200,000 going to college in 18 years. And this is what scares to death every parent in America. Correct. So we have to look very carefully at how are we going to pay for college. And don't assume that grants and loans are going to solve the problem. Only 1/3 of students receive any form of financial aid, and they receive on average only 1/3 of their need. So don't assume that the money will be paid for somewhere else. We need to save on our own. So a couple of fundamental approaches you need to take. Number 1, start now. The best way to save for college is a 529 college savings plan. They're available from all 50 states. There are a couple of hundred different kinds of college savings plans available. Most major mutual fund companies are available in the form of a 529 savings plan. You can also find a college savings plan that invests exclusively in exchange-traded funds, which are the lowest cost way to save for college. So the 529 plan is great because the money goes in and grows tax deferred, and when you pull the money out for college, it is completely tax-free. So you can save virtually unlimited amounts of money without any taxes, and it's a wonderful vehicle. So start saving and save now. But saving is only going to get you so far. The other thing that we've got to focus on is how much are we going to let college cost? So often, we take the attitude as parents that we're going to let our kid go to the school of their choice. Huge mistake. That was okay when we went to school because it wasn't terribly expensive compared to the costs of today. We cannot allow those 3 children, did you
Correct.
say?
Yes.
Decide to make that decision because you're going to end up in the hole $750,000. And heaven forbid any of them decides to go on to grad school. So we need to recognize that college today is designed to develop skills, to be able to get a job, to make money, and build a successful financial life. Therefore, we have to apply an ROI to the college choice decision, a return on investment. For a school teacher, we know they don't get paid a whole lot of money. They don't get paid enough money. We all know this about school teachers. But does it make sense for a kid going to a private school that costs $150,000 to emerge as a school teacher, as opposed to an in-state school that is dramatically cheaper? So we need to determine, based on the field of study that children may be interested in, what kind of cost does it make sense? Don't assume the child has to go to a 4-year education. Community college are terrific. They provide very low-cost way to get the first 2 years of college out of the way. And we all know, let's face it, freshman year is nothing more than 13th grade. It has nothing to do with what their field of study is going to be. So we can dramatically lower the cost with a terrific education at community colleges. We can look at employer-based subsidies. Of course, the most famous is the U.S. military, which provides terrific support for college education in exchange for service for X number of years. A lot of private employers provide similar benefits. So we want to look at it very creatively.
Thank you.
Now it's time to test your financial knowledge. Here's our quiz of the day.
The federal income tax has existed since 1776, 1812, 1863, 1913. Stay tuned for the answer.
Live radio is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Take a look. It's Carol in Maryland. How are you, Carol? Welcome to the program.
Oh, thank you. I had a question. My sister cashed in some E-bonds this past week, and the woman in the bank asked her what she wanted to do with the money, and she said she didn't know. And the woman suggested she consider something called a family legacy. It's a single premium universal life insurance product. And if my sister puts $10,000 in it, the death benefit is about $16,000. And my sister's 75 years old and wants to pass on her money to her children and grandchildren. And I'm just asking you whether this sounds like something she should consider.
Absolutely not. This is a horrific piece of advice, telling somebody who's 75 years old to take the proceeds from E savings bonds and put them into a universal or variable universal or whole life insurance contract. Can you think of anything more abusive, guys?
I can't. Carol, you said that the person asked your sister what she wants to do with her money, and your sister said, I don't know,
well,
and then there was a recommendation.
She cashed in this $8,000 she got. What are you going to do with it, she asked her.
Right.
But your sister's response was, I don't know what I want to do, and so all of a sudden, boom, well, you ought to do this.
Right. There's a recommendation without any discussion in terms of, well, let's have a conversation about your assets, about your goals.
Why are you calling me instead of her?
Well, because she'll get confused. She's done pretty well in what she did with her money over the years, even though she didn't know very much. She has plenty of money, and she doesn't have any financial needs, and so it's just something she's going to pass on to her family. And right now, her health is okay. But,
all right, here's what we need to do, Carol. This is terrific that you're looking out for your sister, and this is increasingly common as the population is aging, and right, we're seeing this all the time of people not. Family members, either adult children or siblings, saying, I'm worried about my brother, my sister, I'm worried about my parents, and I want to help them make sure that they're doing the right thing with their money for their own self-protection.
Right. We see it every week.
Right, and it's very, very common. So it's great that you're getting involved. So we have to recognize two things. One, your involvement's essential because of the way you've described your sister and her capacity for making good, secure decisions. Second, your sister's all over the place, and this is extraordinarily common too. And therefore, what we need to do is get your sister in front of a financial advisor. You organize the meeting, you coordinate it, and you need to go with your sister to the meeting. Taking advice from a bank teller when you're cashing in E bonds is probably not the best way to develop a coordinated financial and estate plan. Okay.
And I would further add to that, Rick. Let's get something straight. These are not bankers. These are investment salespeople. There is a dramatic difference between a banker and an investment salesperson. Just because the investment recommendation comes from somebody inside the physical bank does not mean they're a banker.
In fact, they don't even work for the bank. They work for a subsidiary bank or a subsidiary of the bank or another company that has contracted with the bank to sell these investment and insurance products for commission. So they are not fiduciaries. They are not serving your best interests. They are there to try to get you to invest so that they can earn commissions.
The federal income tax has existed since 1913.
Recently, I had a conversation with Ted Leonsis, one of the early leaders of AOL and now the majority owner of Monumental Entertainment, the company that owns the Washington Capitals hockey team, basketball's Washington Wizards, and the Washington Mystics of the WNBA. Ted is an active entrepreneur who has provided funding for a number of successful startups. He's also an enthusiastic philanthropist who has written several books, including The Business of Happiness: 6 Secrets to Extraordinary Success in Work and Life. The interview took place in Ted's office at the Verizon Center, home of the Caps, the Wizards, and the Mystics. A lot of people do regard sports franchises as a public trust, yet, of course, they are multi-million-dollar businesses. What's your view on balancing between those two?
I've looked at it as if I was going to enter this field, I had to look at it mostly as a public trust, and that the big motivator is not profit and loss, it's championships. It's building a team that the fans can be proud of. It's making lifelong memories. I mean, that's the amazing thing. When I was a kid, my dad was a waiter. We didn't have any money, and he bought 2 season tickets for the New York Jets. And I'd go to Jets games with him. They were $7 a seat, $14 a game, 7 games a year, $100. And it was the greatest time of my life, and the memories that it created for me and my dad were unbelievable. The Jets won the Super Bowl in '69. I remember my dad crying. We were hugging each other. And then he pulled me out of school that following Tuesday and went to the ticker tape parade. And I literally can still remember sitting on his shoulders, as Joe Namath went by and was waving. And my dad died a couple years ago at 95 years old. And as luck would have it, that same year, the Colts, who are now in Indianapolis, were playing the Jets. And on the NFL channel, they were playing the Super Bowl. It was kind of a prelude to the playoff game. And I was on the treadmill, and I'm watching the game, and I started thinking about my dad and being a kid, and I started weeping. And my wife walked in, and she sees me crying. And she goes, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Joe Namath." And she
didn't get it.
She goes, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "This is the business that I'm in. I make grown men cry 40 years after the fact. What other business can you be in to create an indelible memory like that?" And it's why I'm so driven to try to make great teams and ones that can win a Stanley Cup or an NBA championship for our city.
I can't imagine 2 businesses more diametrically opposed, AOL and a sports franchise. What, though, do they have in common from an owner's or entrepreneurial perspective?
Well, ultimately, they're consumer businesses. At AOL, we used to talk about community and that it's your service, and you tell us what you'd like to see, and you vote with your time online, your click streams. Well, it's exactly the same thing here. We were a media business. We made our business through subscriptions and ad sales at AOL. Well, that's what this is. Set of subscribers, we have season ticket holders and suite holders, and we sell advertising and sponsorships. And at the end of the day, it's about the product stupid. So we always used to talk about AOL. It's the product stupid. And, as the Caps have become a better and better team, the brand has flourished, the revenues have strengthened, and I hope to do literally the exact same playbook and apply that for the Wizards and the Mystics. I think my advice, frankly, to everyone is listen to consumers. What I've tried to do by doing my email and being on Facebook and being on Twitter and pulling tickets and mingling with the fans is to keep a pulse on what matters to them, what's important to them, and you represent your city. You close your eyes and you say New York, and New York Yankees and New York Jets and New York Giants and New York Knicks and Rangers, that pops into your mental map of what that city is about. You say Boston, the Red Sox, the Celtics, the Patriots, the Bruins. You say Chicago, the Cubs, the White Sox, the Bulls. And more, you say Washington, people think of the Washington Capitals, and I want them to think of the Washington Wizards.
And let's talk further about community in the sense of philanthropy. You've developed a very strong reputation as being a philanthropist. Tell me how your views have shaped over time on that score.
What I've tried to do is be an activist through my foundation, through all of my companies. I want to make sure that even with the sports teams, that if we have 25 millionaires on the hockey team, I want them all to turn into philanthropists, and we can train them and teach them. And I think there's a direct correlation between how much you give to how much you get back. And I think the happiest, most self-actualized people and organizations are those that understand they're a part of something bigger than their day-to-day activity. And getting out of the day-to-day and being able to understand and identify what are the big problems and how can you use your collective talents to go solve these problems.
You're not only doing this, though, by writing checks, you've become a very active documentary filmmaker. Talk about those projects.
Well, I have started to make some movies. I've made 3 movies. You know, I guess I'm a successful filmmaker in that they've all been bought. HBO bought one, ESPN has bought the other 2. They went to Sundance. I won an Emmy Award. But I have fallen in love with documentary filmmakers and the industry. Unbelievably talented people in pursuit of a higher calling. Most people are making these movies to right a wrong or activate charitable giving. They're unbelievably talented. And I made some films and I realized how broken the industry was and frankly how one-sided the industry was to support the people in the industry and not the filmmakers. So a couple of years ago I started a business called Snag Films, and I wanted to become a destination online for all of these great films, some of them which never see the light of day, don't get distribution. And now we have 2,000 films. You go to snagfilms.com, and then if you like the film, you can snag it and open a virtual movie theater. You can open that theater on your blog or your website or your Facebook page. There's only 500 movie theaters in the United States that will show documentary films. In less than 3 years, we have 110,000 virtual movie theaters open around the web. We're streaming 20 million films a month. We're giving half the revenue to the filmmaker. We attach a charity to every film. We're supporting about 500 films, and it's the epitome of a double bottom line business, a business that can do really, really well by doing good.
And the real key, the fundamental basis of documentary filmmaking is getting the word out. There's an issue that requires a documentary, and that issue is largely going by without people realizing it.
Yeah, the distribution channels are pretty broken. I mean, it is ironic now. You shoot every film in HD digitally, and then you step it down to analog to get into theaters. I spent my whole life doing the opposite, taking analog properties and digitizing them.
A lot of people watching this are no doubt going to be excited and enthused about the technological elements of our conversation here, but most are not techies themselves nor entrepreneurial minded. What ways, though, what messages should they be drawing from our conversation? How do we apply this general information to strategic, specific action steps that they can execute?
Well, I think, one, people should focus on being happy and being active in their communities of interest and tuning up their empathy and having high levels of self-expression and being in pursuit of a higher calling. In terms of technology, I can't really think of one aspect of our day-to-day life. We used to type a letter and put it in an envelope and put a stamp on it and bring it down to the post office. And when you think about it, it's pretty barbaric, right? It would take 3 or 4 days. And now we send emails, and now we don't even have to send emails. We can do a tweet or we can do a text. And so the pace of change has been dramatic. And so I would say that we should be embracing this new world, this new technology. It'll just get faster, cheaper until it's free across the board. And I would say that it's like oxygen. You better get used to it.
Ted, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure.
Before we go, if you're planning to buy a new house, ignore how much money the lender says you can borrow. Instead, limit your mortgage payments to 28% of your income. Otherwise, you face the risk of being house poor, and that means you won't be able to save for retirement or even have enough money to decorate that house or go on vacation. Remember, the bigger the loan, the more money the lender makes, which is why they like to tell you that you can borrow more than you really should. Be smart. Stick to that 28% limit when getting a mortgage. And that's the truth about money. I'm Ric Edelman. Thanks for watching.